The last dance after show from the Action Network. Sad to see it go. Crushed that it's ended. This has been the best medicine for quarantine we could possibly get. Chad Millman, Justin Fan, Worldwide Wab, Rob Perez, Matt Moore. Guys, unbelievable ending. And we're going to get to the ending. Like, there was actually, to me, like, it was a little bit of a shocker, the way it ended. And I want to get to that. I don't think we can start with anything other than this, considering this has been a theme and a meme throughout the entire 4-week run of the series, 5-week run of the series. It's before Game 7 against the Pacers, the second Game 7 during the run. Michael Jordan is in his back room in the locker room. He is with his security guys and Ahmad Rashad 2 hours before the game. And for those who don't know the media, it's not that common for members of the media who are part of the broadcast network to be hanging out with the star player of the other team 2 hours before the game. And to have the star player say to him, "You were instructed not to talk to Scott Burrell." Again, Scott Burrell getting the huge L in this particular shot. To me, that was one of the funniest things of the entire series, is Jordan in the most intense moment thinking about Scott Burrell. Justin Fan, you've been feeling bad for Scott Burrell for 5 weeks. What was your take on that?
This man is just catching strays every freaking week. Like, he's the only one that's consistently getting dunked on. At least Jerry Krause had a little bit of, a redemption type of stretch at the end there, where Pippen called him the greatest GM in history, and Jordan had some, kinder words to say. But Scott Burrell consistently getting dunked on from start to finish. Man, I mean, we see this throughout the documentary too, and we've talked about this before with Jordan getting final cut on all this stuff. You see it in how this documentary has gone. He has his guys that he really respects. You saw it in the last 2 episodes with Steve Kerr and Gus. Those were his guys, and he gave those two the platform. He told them their story. He displayed it in a positive light. And he had these other guys that he's still holding grudges with: Jerry Krause, Isaiah Thomas, Gary Payton, Scott Burrell, Clyde Drexler. Like, we see that kind of shine through and how they're portrayed and the role in documentaries. So I feel bad for my man Scott Burrell. I mean, he was just there for a season, and he just made cameos throughout this whole documentary.
What is it? What do we think it is about Scott Burrell, Wob?
I don't know, because he's such a nice personality. It's the same philosophy of why Shaq started those rumors about David Robinson back in the day, that David Robinson wasn't signing kids' autographs. He just completely made it up because this guy was just so nice. Kevin Garnett said he couldn't stand Tim Duncan because Tim Duncan would be like, "Very nice shot, sir." Or he'd be like, "Thank you very much for the great competition tonight. It drove trash talkers crazy." So if you're this super alpha male mentality and you've got this guy that's just like, all right, just making pure reeking of positivity, it drives him nuts. So I think it was more like, don't go talk to Scott Burrell. He was kind of joking, but mostly being serious, but kind of joking, but most definitely being serious, right? So I think it was just someone that he was the antithesis personality to him, that he found could make good spirits out of what so many other players in Jordan's past could not, was make light of those situations, because we had a parade of players go on camera and say, "Jordan was an asshole, man. And I played with him and I stand up for him, but man, was he mean." I think Scott Burrell was the one guy to just kind of laugh and just like laugh at himself as much as Jordan was trying to laugh at him.
That's, to me, what was amazing in this is, and that Pacers series was amazing, and going 7 games. I am surprised that there wasn't more sort of Isaiah Thomas-like hate, Matt Moore, for Reggie Miller, because Michael and Reggie went after each other. Like, that was physical, choking confrontation earlier in their career. I'm just surprised that there wasn't more animosity.
Reggie never beat him. That's why. Like, I think that's central to it, right? Is like, no, by the time that Jordan faced Miller, he was already accepted as the greatest of all time. So all of these slights that we see him manufacture are all entirely fabricated. Like, what was your motivation versus the Jazz? Well, Karl Malone got MVP. Well, Karl Malone didn't take the MVP. It wasn't Karl Malone's choice to get the MVP. Like, no, there wasn't anything really left there. And there wasn't any sort of idea that anybody else was better than Jordan. So, like, no one was ever going to say Reggie was better than MJ. And I think on top of it, like, Reggie comes from an iconic basketball family. Reggie, I just think Reggie was a phenomenal trash talker in his own right. I think there was a mutual respect there. But I also just think, like, there was never really any threat. Like, Jordan went for the jugular versus anybody who was perceived as a threat to him. Like, Drexler was perceived as a threat to him because he was thought to be better than him. And Isaiah had all that tension with him. Like, Jordan reserved that real hatred for guys that he actually had to compete with. And I don't think he ever had to compete with Reggie Miller that way.
It's also amazing to me from that series. So then they're going to play the Jazz in the finals. And he's, immediately talking about he hates Karl Malone because Karl Malone won the MVP. I had no idea of the origin story of Brian Russell. The Brian Russell snub when MJ had retired, Wob, that to me was something brand new. And these last two episodes to me were full of brand new stuff. But that to me carried forth so much of what Jordan felt about this guy and why he liked to beat Brian Russell so badly against the Jazz.
Well, yeah, it all started when Jordan was playing baseball and he was in the gym and Russell was taunting him, right? I could come back. He's just being like a cocky little rookie. But I don't think what point in MJ's career are we at that point? We are post-Dream Team. We are post the Danny Ainge golf story. At that point, I think you have to know not to say those things to piss off Michael Jordan, but maybe he actually believed there's no chance this guy's coming back. I'll just mouth off to him and it'll make me feel better. And the problem is, like, nobody kept receipts like Jordan did. I mean, the man made up his own receipts. He was making up things that other players said in his head just to piss himself off. Like, you can't give him that material, especially if you don't want him back in the league. The last thing you should ever do is tell him you can't do this, because then out of just principle, he's proven he will just do that, whether that is coming back and playing basketball on the golf course, whatever. It could be something just completely subtle and meaningless. Like, he has to win. He admitted himself he has a competition problem. So that's on Russell in the first place. I don't want anyone to feel bad for Brian Russell because he's the one that started it. So how could I?
Well, that's the thing. Like, I had never heard that part of the story. I had never heard that Brian Russell had basically started it. Even if he was like a young kid just joking about it with Jordan, I had never heard that he actually went after him the first time, Matt Moore. And so like I feel so much less bad for Brian Russell throughout the years of being tortured after hearing that. Because kind of like, well, he started it. Matt Moore, go ahead.
Yeah, so I got a question. Funny thing here, we got a lot. Reggie Miller is in the documentary, and a lot of the other guys are in the documentary. And Byron Russell's not in the documentary. Brian Russell's not in the documentary. Karl Malone's not in the documentary. Stockton is, but you don't hear really from these guys. Like, there's no, like, Karl Malone doesn't confirm that story, actually. So, like, genuine question, how much do we believe it actually happened? Because, again, nothing really to back it up, just Jordan saying it. And we already have on record Jordan makes up things in order to motivate himself. Like, I thought that was really kind of weird to have, like, this really big moment and this really key, like, phenomenal, iconic sports moment of an amazing push-off for him to not at all have any sort of say in the conversation. I thought was a little weird. Like, the story makes sense, right? Like, a rookie, like, doesn't know any better and he's mouthing off and Karl's like, no, don't do that. And like, please, Mike, don't. And it makes sense. And like, knowing what I know about Brian Russell, like, that makes sense, like, given what we know about him. But it's just kind of weird that, like, how it was presented didn't have any sort of, like, it was just like, this is what happened because MJ said so. That's the bottom line. Like,
yeah.
We just kind of moved on.
The same thing with the Bradford Smith you talked about earlier. He just kind of made that up. And we don't know if it happened, to what extent it happened, if he kind of fibbed a little bit of the details to make it sound a little bit worse than it actually was. Like, we get a lot of that from this documentary. And I want to talk about this too. The main thing that came out of this that I had a problem with with Jordan having Final Cut is his story about the food poisoning and the bad pizza, because the details of that do not add up. Like, is he just ordering in advance from just, by the outside the restaurant with his window down, like, hey, you're making a pizza for me? Like, how do they know that it's the pizza specifically for him? That still does not make any sense to me.
Does anyone believe that it was the pizza? Does anyone on this call, even Chad, Shadow's own Millman, does anyone here believe it was the pizza?
I could totally believe he was a combination of either food poisoning or sick. I mean, that is quite the act to slow roll for like 3 straight hours. I mean, unless you're just like really tired. Does it have to be something specific to like be the flu game, or can he just be not healthy? I would agree that it was not healthy. I just don't know what the specific reasoning was. I don't think he had to have the flu specifically to it to be called the flu game. I've always seen it as the guy was just not feeling well. Like, it gets the name flu game, but he just wasn't feeling well. It doesn't change anything for me.
It doesn't change anything at all. But listen, like, I'm surprised, Wob, you have a sort of semi-accepting take on this, because you are the king of accepting and loving conspiracy theories in the NBA. And this to me feels like everybody was intimating. Tim Grover is intimating there's something wrong with this. There's 4 guys delivering the pizza. There's one place that's open. It's Michael Jordan that's getting the pizza. How do they know Michael Jordan is getting the pizza? The whole thing, like, but to what end? Like, is he thinking are they thinking, oh yeah, we're going to get Michael Jordan out of this game? Like, that's what doesn't make sense about it. Forget about what Matt is saying. Like, it just doesn't make sense that, like, there's 4 pizza guys who can have this much of an impact on the finals. They can get a dirty pizza to Michael Jordan to take him out of game 5 or whatever.
Yeah, but this happens all the time, though, that crazy fans will get the room numbers of players that their teams are playing in any sport. They'll wake them up with fire alarms at 3:00 in the morning. And if you can convince me that this pizza place poisoned pizza, like I'm watching the Joffrey at Game of Thrones wedding, like, wouldn't the pizza have tasted terrible? Like, wouldn't it have been moldy or something? You're not like dropping arsenic into pizza and like delivering it to him. Were they trying to like kill Michael and it just like didn't work? I mean, we could go like steep. I don't believe that, but that's what it sure sounds like when they're telling us the story. Is these 4 guys showed up in their like Inspector Gadget uniforms and trench coats and glasses and handed over this pizza. And if you're sketched out, keep in mind the process of how that pizza gets to Michael Jordan. So you've got his personal assistant, his trainer, that are all looking at the pizza. First of all, I assume it's a pie of pizza that other people may or may not have had to eat. So the pizza has to go from the door through all of Jordan's people to Jordan. Then Jordan has to examine it himself and consume it. So unless it was poisoned with arsenic, selenium, some form of human killing composition of chemistry class, like Walter White is in the room next door with Jesse Pinkman in yellow raincoats concocting blue meth, I am not going to believe that these 4 pizza guys somehow got the call from Pepe's Pizza in downtown Salt Lake and said, I think this is Michael Jordan. We should poison this pizza. Because what if it wasn't Michael Jordan's? What if it was just normal people getting this pizza? You're telling me this pizza place was about to kill someone, that they were trying to poison normal humans? It's such a ludicrous concept that pizza was poisoned. You think on the phone they said, this is for Michael Jordan, please make the pizza good? No! They put someone else's name on the credit card on it and everything. They didn't have a clue. It could have been anyone staying in that hotel. So get the hell out of here that this was like some mission.
See, this is way better than your first take. This is what I'm here for, the WOB investigation, and you just going all in on this, because I completely agree. I think it's, but for going back to Chad's point, it didn't add anything. I don't know why they felt the need to put that in there, because he was sick. I think we can all acknowledge that part. I don't understand this whole like myth building, or like this whole trying to paint the Utah Jazz, the Utah community, or the pizzerias in Utah as
They tried to poison us.
Yeah, I don't
understand. To poison us in that hotel room that night.
I didn't understand why that part was in there at all. It didn't really add much. It just seemed ridiculous.
Wait, you guys are confused about why they spent a lot of time building a mythology up for MJ in this documentary?
Here we go. Here we go.
Jerry Krause is the devil, and everything Jordan did was in pursuit of greatness. Like, I don't know. I will say this though, I get why they did it, just from the perspective of, like, it was an iconic game. Like, the flu game is. There are moments that stand out to us, right? Like Ray Allen's shot, the shot by Jordan versus Elo, the block by LeBron, etc. Like, very few singular performances are described as the game. Like, Hakeem Olajuwon walked into the building and absolutely annihilated David Robinson when he got the MVP award. And even that one doesn't have a name. So, like, it's an iconic moment. So I understand, like, okay, you want to know what happened. Here's, like, Jordan finally being like, here's what actually happened. The only problem I have is, like, I don't believe any of it and think it's all bullshit. I think that he probably enjoyed himself too much the night before.
Oh, Matt. Here's the other thing that was amazing to me. Is
in Utah? Hold on. In Utah, He enjoyed himself?
No.
Going where?
No. He did all of his stuff in the hotel room. We know this.
Oh, okay.
All right. So let's also talk about the last thing I want to talk about, because there is so much stuff to talk about in episode 10. But the trash talk he gave to Larry Bird after Game 7 is maybe my favorite moment of the entire series, because I feel like those are two guys who know each other so well and are such good friends. There does not have to be any sentimentality about any interaction they have with each other at all. Like, Michael does not have to feel bad that he just beat Larry Bird, and Larry Bird would have done the same thing to Michael Jordan if they had beaten Michael Jordan. He would not have been like, oh, I just kept him from getting to his, sixth world championship or sixth finals or whatever it is. Like, it would, like, and his Larry Bird's face after Michael Jordan hits that shot, or it's like after Reggie Miller hits that shot. I would have loved so much more of the interplay between Larry Bird and Michael Jordan.
Well, their history, Larry Bird beat up on him at the end of the 80s. So he has plenty of W's over Jordan. We've seen pictures just in the last couple of weeks of them playing late night cards together in Barcelona, Dream Team experiences. So anyone that was on camera during this documentary, maybe they were friends, or maybe Bird was just like, they can have that playful talk because I know I got you too at some point. And it just becomes that mutual respect versus Michael Jordan being the dominant alpha, planting his flag on every player. Maybe that's why Karl Malone and Russell didn't want to. I don't know the circumstances of why they weren't on this documentary, but there were a lot of people who could have been on the documentary that probably chose not to be. They may still hold grudges. Hell, even Isaiah Thomas came on this damn thing. So, you know what? I don't know. I can't get there. It's that Bird is that Bird should be like one of those in the Karl Malone category per se, right?
No. I'm not saying he should be. I loved it. Like, to me, it was two alpha males who respect each other so much.
Right.
Jordan could say that to him, and like Bird is totally accepting of it because he knows he said the same thing to Jordan in the past.
Facts.
I love that moment.
Yeah.
Though also surrendered the throne pretty easy. Like, this is a key moment, is that in the Dream Team practices, like, they're in the pool room and Magic and Michael are going back and forth. And Larry Bird says out loud, like, Magic, the game's his now. Like, that's
but Larry Bird could barely walk at that point.
Right. But this is my point, though, is like, you're saying, like, well, he'd already gotten these ones. So there's like a mutual shared respect. And it was more that, like, Bird bent the knee. Again, like, if you are someone that he had to overcome, then he absolutely hated you. But like, he was teammates with Bird. He did respect Bird because he thought he was on that level. He wanted to get to that level. He came before him. Like, that's what's kind of interesting, because like Isaiah came before him, but there wasn't, like, the age gap's different. So there's like a different feeling there between the two, and just the dynamics between the two. But also, like, Bird bent the knee. Like, Bird understood very early how much better Jordan was. And like, Bird was never really interested in being like, I'm the best player of all time, and like, I'm the better than you. Like, Magic and he had more tension than Bird did, because Bird was just like,
That's why, though. I wouldn't consider it bending the knee. I would consider it passing the torch only. There was no knee bending from Larry Bird. I mean, his time was up. His rivalry was with Magic Johnson. That's why when I saw Reggie Miller out here and Jordan's talking about the biggest competition we had was Reggie, he's comfortable saying that because he never really had to play Reggie. It was Reggie versus the Knicks for a straight decade. They were the ones in the trenches fighting each other. So it was definitely torch passing more so than like Bird is, you know what, you are the GOAT of all time. There was absolutely none of that going on. It was very much mutual respect-y, in my opinion.
All right, Justin, in every one of our post shows, you have said something that was most memorable to you from the previous two shows that we just watched, which was on my list that we hadn't gotten to yet. Give me your most memorable moment from these last two episodes.
Man, I'm gonna go two. So this is kind of an aside. I really like the whole bit on Steve Kerr. You know, with his history.
It's on my list.
You know, with his dad, his background. Just I tweeted out like I think there should be a 10-part documentary on Steve Kerr. Like he's been through so much, both as a player and as a coach, and also as a person. And then the whole really my favorite parts of these documentaries are the behind the scenes like little footage between players. We saw on the bench where Jordan was like, "Be ready," and then Kerr was like, "I'll be ready." You heard that. They found the actual clip of that happening. That was amazing. You know, that was before he hit that shot, and then the championship parade speech was incredible. Right after that, just a super funny dude. And then obviously, I mean, maybe the craziest part of these two parts was the whole part about Rodman leaving the team. Missing practice after game 3 of the NBA Finals. Like his whole 1 week vacation before is nothing compared to this. That was during the regular season. There was still plenty of time left for him to get back in game shape, for them to ramp up for the playoffs. This was in the middle of the NBA Finals. And the quotes about I was just trying to play basketball, you know, blank all the girls. That was just incredible. And Phil is Phil because he let Rodman be Rodman, and there was no, you know, harsh team penalty or them coming down on him or him trying to lay down the law. He understand, you know, that Rodman would be there on the court, that he was bought in, that when he was there, he would play his ass off and contribute. So I think was like insane.
I now have to go in and change one of my scheduled tweets because Justin just took my most absurd moment from this documentary is the fact that Dennis Rodman told his coach that I have to go to Vegas because I have needs was not even the most preposterous excuse to play hooky in a 2-week span. The fact that he left the finals to go to fight with Hulk Hogan in NWO, which, oh, by the way, in game 6, when he's in his little scuffle with Karl Malone on the court and they're slapping each other's ass. This whole final series was just one big promo for Bash at the Beach because Karl Malone joins Diamond Dallas Page to fight Hulk Hogan and Dennis Rodman very soon coming up in the summer after that finals is over. So we weren't watching basketball. We were just watching a WCW promo. That's what that was to me. And the fact that I have to go to Vegas because I have needs was not the most absurd quote of this series is just the epitome of Dennis Rodman.
He's walking off the court. Remember, he's walking off the court and he gives the whole that celebration too. Amazing.
Yeah, I feel like today's world, Dennis Rodman leaving the finals in the middle to go party and go into a WWE, WCW party, Nitro, whatever it was with Hulk Hogan. It's incomprehensible. The fact Phil Jackson was able to manage that, and like that Michael Jordan was able to manage that, and Scottie Pippen was able to manage that, for all of their need and willingness and their sort of neediness to win and their competitive fire, to understand what Dennis Rodman needed and that it didn't matter because he was going to show up on the day of the game, is like a level of maturity and like thoughtfulness that just doesn't seem possible anymore. Matt Moore.
I of course wouldn't describe it as such. I think that it was more that like, look, they were just like, nothing stops the money train. Like nothing stops. Like he's done this before. He's run off. He comes back. He's going to play. I know he's going to play. Like the fact that Rodman was somebody that could do this and you could count on him at this point, like it says a lot both about where Rodman was at mentally, and also where Jordan was in terms of his relationship. That like, I think there was probably a level of the only person on the planet that probably Dennis Rodman didn't want to let down. The two people were probably Phil Jackson and Michael Jordan. Like those are probably the two people in the sports world, at least, that Rodman would care enough to not want to let down. Not enough to not go do these things, but enough to be like, no, I'll be back though. Like I will make sure I can come back. And like part of it for Rodman, I think, is probably like, I want to prove that I can do it. Like athletes love this idea of anyone that says like, we can't do this, that like they want to push that boundary. Like they want to push beyond. Like that to me is one of the defining traits of greatness, is the idea of like, I'm going to push beyond what is thought to be reasonable, what is thought to be how it's supposed to be, what's supposed to be the limit. Like that exceptionalism, I think, is what defines them as great. And like, I don't know that there was like he really needs this, and like this is what's best for like him. I don't think he needed to hit Diamond Dallas Page with a chair coming out of the tunnel, self high five. Like I don't think that needed to happen in order for him to feel complete as a like this wasn't like therapy, Chad. Like he went off to make some money doing something else because he knew that the jig was up this summer and he was setting himself up for another payday. And the Bulls were like, "You gonna be back?" "Yeah." "All right." And that was pretty much it. And so like, it's a bizarre story in retrospect. And to think about how it would play out on Twitter now is incredible. But it's also just kind of a testament to how much they were all just kind of like, okay, like this is Dennis and this is how it's going to be. Like an interesting question is, are there other Bulls that could have gotten away with that? Like if other Bulls had other things going on, if you know, Kerr was like, I got this thing going on, like I got to go to, or, you know, like whoever, like if when any one of those guys like went off for that, would they have gotten the same treatment? Probably. Bulls,
no.
I don't care as long as you're back.
Can you imagine Judd Bushler trying to say, I got to leave to go wine tasting. I'll be back on Wednesday or some shit.
Okay, so if that's the case, if we accept then, sorry, I've been reading a lot of Plato, so there's a lot of questions going on here. Like, if we accept then that everybody else on that team doesn't get the same treatment, then we can't be like, it takes a real thoughtfulness and maturity, because it can't be like they were really thoughtful and mature to one dude.
That doesn't compute though, Matt, because Rodman's way different personality wise than any other person on the team, maybe any other person in the league ever. Like the way he's built, the way he operates.
Rodman was so good that was allowed. Okay. If like, again, if Bushler or one of these end of the bench guys tries to pull that and it's not in line with his character, that was kind of like signed off on when you bring Dennis Rodman there. You know what you're signing up for, that he's going to need that at some point just because of the way that he's wired. So I think he's the only one that gets away with that because he's able to back it up with his play on the court, which is why winning always trumps all. Winning has become this martyr of personalities and attitudes that other people can't get away with. Like, it's not fair. I agree with you, Matt. It's absolutely not fair that Dennis Rodman can do these things and other players cannot. But the fact that he was that vital to winning, yes, it gave him the excuse. And before I get your rebuttal, just let me say that in 1998, there was absolutely nothing cooler than the NWO. It was even cooler than the Bulls, and maybe not worldwide, but in the United States, the NWO black and white was the coolest thing on earth. You're playing for the Bulls, you're fighting for NWO, and you go home to Carmen Electra. Unbelievable. Sorry.
What a legend.
Gave a great hip drag, a hip toss at Bash at the Beach too, by the way. I wasn't, my point here is not that it wasn't fair. It's that I'm trying, like, if we're going to talk about the reasons why this construct worked, it's more about what you're talking about, Wob, in terms of he won. Like, he won, so all this stuff was let slide. It wasn't like I think Phil Jackson gets a little too much credit for this in terms of like, he just like managed the situation. He didn't manage anything. Rodman said, hey, I'm going to do this. It feels like, hey, Rodman's going to do this. And everybody's like, okay. And like, I don't think that there's any sort of like Zen mastery, wisdom nonsense that goes on there. I think it was.
I do. He had to manage the other players, Matt. He had to manage the other players. So Rodman is seen on television. You're telling me Weddington and Longley and these guys are like, what is Dennis Rodman doing on TV? They show up to practice the next day. He's wearing pajamas and slides to practice. Phil has to manage those expectations because everyone in the NBA has an ego, is making millions of dollars, and thinks they're the best player on the court because at one point in their careers, they were the best player on the court. So I would agree that it was Phil's responsibility. There is no box score statistic or advanced analytic, but Phil was able to manage those personalities to the point that it got them to the finish line. Maybe his strategy was saying absolutely nothing. And then I guess I have to credit him. Otherwise, I would sound like a hypocrite, right? What's up?
But we also don't hear any of that, right? They don't say like, but then Phil came and talked to us and he explained us the soul and the importance of representing the new world order and what that means for the spirit. Like none of that. So like we are left.
Someone go and confiscate all these like Plato books that Matt's reading. Like Jesus, this is outrageous.
I know. Honest to God, I feel like this is pretty simple. Like Phil Jackson understood that Dennis Rodman was the best defensive player he had, the best rebounder he had, and an unbelievably eccentric character. Michael Jordan understood that Dennis Rodman was going to help him win a title, and he was going to be the buffer. And if Michael Jordan didn't get mad, and Michael Jordan, who has proven he had the utmost respect for authority and the elder statesmen who were running his basketball life, then he was going to allow Phil Jackson to manage this situation any way he wanted to, and he wasn't going to try to be insubordinate. That was it. That was the whole thing. I think the only go ahead, Justin.
You're right though, Matt. In terms of like the Phil Jackson credit thing, like what is he going to do? Like, is he going to hold him out of game 4? Like he understands that they need him, that he has to play. So there's only so much that he can do, like discipline wise to him or whatever, right?
I don't know if this happens in 1996 though, as opposed to 1998, because at this point it is nuclear meltdown. All of these things are happening. We all know it's over after this. So why would I like bench him for like the betterment of a team that I'm going to be a part of and build a culture? No, this was it. And winning at all costs, whether it was letting Dennis Rodman go do his thing, letting Scottie Pippen throw his tantrums on the bench, it didn't matter. Whatever got us to the finish line, because like Jerry Krause said, if I go 82-0, it's ending anyway. So he gave me that. He started this. You said if we go 82-0, if all is well, you're still getting fired anyway. So what that means to me is I have to do whatever in my power to win. And that's exactly what it is to me.
That is a great segue. Matt, we're moving on. That is a great segue. I think the only other person who could have gotten away with this was Scotty Burrell. I think we can all agree that the respect he had on that team would have allowed him to disappear for a couple of days. Michael Jordan at the end of this, this is a very poignant scene to me. He is given the iPad with Jerry Reinsdorf saying, we broke up this team because of Rodman, because of Pippen, because of Kerr, because all these guys were going to leave. And Michael Jordan looks surprised. He looks amazed. It looks like it's the first time he's ever hearing this. And he goes on to say, I think we could have gotten everyone to come back to win a 7th title. I wrote down while watching this episode, I think they broke up at the right time.
Yeah, I'll lead this off. I thought Reinsdorf explained it as best as he could. You didn't get one of those crazy reactions from Michael Jordan on the iPad. You got those like, oh, that's interesting eye pops. But since when did Michael Jordan all of a sudden think like, yeah, we could come back and do this for another 2 years? He's been telling us this whole time that, like, especially even after the first three-peat, I'm tired. I'm done with basketball. And he's just been telling us for 9 episodes how exhausted that the 97-98 season did with what happened with Pippen, waiting with his contract and his surgery on his ankle and all of this punching Steve Kerr back. Like, all of these things led to the point of this being the climax. And then all of a sudden, you know what? Let's go do 2 more years. That was eye-popping to me that he wasn't sticking to this is the last dance. Otherwise, Phil wouldn't have said, this is the last dance. He said the last dance because everyone knew it was the last year.
Do you think a lot of that tension came from the fact, and he mentioned this, that Krause said before the season that if you go 82-0, we're still not bringing you back. Is he still miffed by the fact that they didn't even like attempt to at least like see if it would work, see if they would come back, and they just kind of outright ruled it out and just made assumptions that, oh no, this is not going to work no matter what? Is that part of why he's still feeling like the lingering, feelings about it.
Remember, this is as much of a business as it is X's and O's on the court. And in that situation, you would have had to pay Michael Jordan the maximum amount of money. You would have had to make good with Scottie Pippen just to get him back. And what we saw at the end of the Utah Jazz series there, we didn't know at the time if he was going to return and be the Scottie Pippen that was supposed to be making these max deals. So do you want to go out like Floyd Mayweather, 50-0, that you go out on top, but you still have some punches left? You know what I mean? You could have Floyd Mayweather could probably go 54-0 if he really tried. But is it worth it? Because if you lose in 98, 99 to a Spurs team, which all of a sudden is becoming like going to be probably better than the Bulls very, very quickly, very, very soon. Like, why would we stick around and ruin our legacy like that? It was over. It was over. And for him to kind of go out there and not throw Reinsdorf under the bus, but kind of backpedal on the whole, I wasn't tired. I wasn't like, this wasn't it. That was weird. I think just seeing the Reinsdorf video angered him to the point that it triggered in his mind that, no, that's not what I was thinking. We could have came back and done 2 more. Because if you challenge Jordan and you say he can't do anything, he's just going to automatically think, like we've been talking about, making shit up in his head. He's going to think, no, we could have came back and won 2 more titles, let alone 1. The business didn't work out. Like, you could have made good with Scottie and had Tony and rebuilt. Jerry could have rebuilt this team. It just changed like this to me. That's not fair to anyone in the Bulls organization that is not a player.
Matt Moore, you're awfully quiet here right now.
None of this makes any fucking sense. None of it. None of this makes sense. So Reinsdorf is on camera saying he calls Phil into his office and says, I will trump Krause and we will bring you back. Okay. They're all on the same page that Krause is the devil and this fat, horrible person and doesn't know anything and is the worst. Okay. And even at that point, like, there's a lot of documentation that Phil's relationship with Krause, despite Krause bringing him to the NBA, has soured and gone badly, in large part because of Krause's own insecurities. So, like, okay, even if we accept then that this was Phil's decision, that he left, that he was the one that was like, no, like, I'm done. Phil does this exact same thing in the book following the Lakers first, like the Lakers dynasty, like that first set of titles, that like managing these players at this level is something that maybe he is the absolute greatest in the history of the game at. It also taxes him and it wears him out to the point where he goes to Montana and takes a long time off and then comes back and ruins the Knicks. Like, that's what he does, right? And at that point, if Phil's not coming back, then does Jordan want to come back? And then the question is, okay, Jordan says, if those guys will come back on 1 more year, I would have come back on 1 more year. And then you have Reinsdorf saying the amount of money that we would have had to spend would not have made it worth it. So Justin is doing what a lot of the internet is currently doing and saying, like, so then we have to like assume like he just wouldn't pay these salaries. That's what is the entire thing here, is that the reaction is, gosh, Reinsdorf and Krause, how dumb were they? They could have had it going. This could have gone on forever. So Jordan gets in by saying this and constructing this way. He gets to hold on to, I was the best when I retired. I could have won more. I could have won more titles. All the other guys you thought were good, I still would have beaten them. I would have been good forever. He does all of this, and he throws Reinsdorf under the bus without any sort of discussion for what those guys. And he's like, Pippen, maybe we had to work. Pippen was never coming back on a 1-year deal. That dude was getting the bag. Like, he was going to get the bag, period, end dot. Like, that was going to be important to him. And so, like, none of this makes any sense. Either Reinsdorf is lying or Jordan is lying. Or both of them are lying. And I'd love to get Krause's perspective. It's weird that Krause isn't mentioned at all in the documentary at any point with the fact that he died. So, like, none of this entire situation makes any sense, but that kind of fits the whole documentary in terms of we're framing everything to present the thing the way that, like, Jordan's legacy in his mind should be presented going forward. And in that manner, like, it's a phenomenal piece of history, because of how slanted and well-guided it is in directing a narrative. Okay, so here's how they should have proceeded with that is Reinsdorf versus Jordan of he said, she said that they weren't coming back. The situation doesn't even need reasoning or excuses, because if you're going to bring back Pippen and Jordan, we know that Jordan has said, I'm not coming back unless Pippen was here too.
So you would have to sign Scottie Pippen first before Jordan accepts his contract. If you're not going to give Scottie Pippen the bag that the Portland Trailblazers gave him, which no chance in hell that the Bulls were ever giving him that deal, okay, Pippen would have never signed with the Bulls, would have went and signed with the Trailblazers, and then Jordan we would have ended the last dance there on the spot. But because we're narrative fueling here, the facts of Scottie Pippen would have never signed with the Bulls in the first place, even if these two, Reinsdorf and Jordan, could agree that we wanted to proceed and see if we could go just one more year. Because they absolutely could have, in terms of like words, but when it came to actions, Scottie Pippen was gone because he was going to go make more money. Not because he didn't want to be on the Bulls, but because they were never, ever going to match that contract. And as soon as that domino fell, so would have Jordan, so would have Phil, and then we'd have a completely different narrative. End of story.
And it's weird.
Justin, up. All right, Matt, go ahead, then Justin.
Okay. I was just going to say that, like, you know, if that was where Jordan was at, he was at his peak, like, this ended, like, I completely agree with Wob. It ended the way that it should have. Like, the lasting image of Jordan hitting that shot being the last image that we ever see of him on an NBA court is really phenomenal and honoring his legacy. Go ahead, Justin.
Wow.
Yeah, seriously.
No, I just pointed that out just to try to get behind what Jordan was thinking and why he would say what he said. I don't really buy into that they could have won and they broke him up at the wrong time. I thought Reinsdorf, his viewpoint was that of a practical owner GM, like salary caps, like we couldn't make it work with the numbers, which is exactly what would have happened. So I just kind of posited that as trying to get into, you know, why we kind of saw what we saw. But I agree that there was a lot of revisionist history, and I agree with the decision.
All right. It's been an incredible 5 weeks of episodes. For all of the faults that some of us on this panel might think the series had, starting with Matt Moore, then Justin, then Wob, give me your final takeaways of the series and your impressions of Jordan from the series.
I loved it. I'm not kidding. I loved it. Like, look, I like that we're having these conversations. I got to come on here with no NBA happening, and every time that I think about the playoffs that I'm not getting to bet on, I get depressed. I get to come on here and try and tear down an idol of Chad's. Like, what other job would afford me that? No, like, I really did love it. Like, I thought the documentary was really well produced. The music absolutely banged. Like, every single episode was killer. I love the cinematography. Like, are there things that I wish were better? Yeah, because we're hyper analyzing this because it's the only thing that's on. Like, if I'm catching this in between doing game analysis, I'm not going to have had the same kind of reactions. In the end, Jordan is the same person that I thought he was before the documentary began. None of this really changed anything. And that's okay. It exposed him to a younger generation. I'm glad that these generations that didn't get to watch him got to see those 80s clips, to see how insane he was, got to see like how much he pulled these teams through. Like, it really brought an appreciation. This is like what film can do with absolutely great sport. And I really genuinely enjoyed it. Also, he kind of sucks as a person. Fan?
No, I would echo a lot of what Matt said. I don't think it changed my perception of Jordan at all. I mean, he is kind of who we thought he was. I mean, a fierce competitor who had, you know, contentious and often overbearing tendencies with his teammates to berate them, and he was really tough on them. And that's kind of the story, all the stories that we've gotten, you know, heading into this. So it just kind of confirmed that. And I thought it was really well done. I thought kind of his decision to record these interviews beforehand and then hand them to Jordan on an iPad and get his genuine reaction was some of the best stuff in this documentary. Like, just getting those memes and those reactions from him were incredible. That was just really, really well done. And I thought it was just my favorite part of it was just the nostalgic part and seeing all the behind the scenes footage, the footage from the locker room from the All-Star game, the stuff with Kobe. There's so many like little moments like that. The stuff with Larry Bird, those little clips and like the stuff with Steve Kerr, on the bench, like those little things that we weren't kind of clued into and we didn't get to see before this documentary. Those are my favorite parts, really.
Well, I don't need to echo because we all watched it. It's well done in terms of production and editing and how much red tape this documentary had to go through to even make air. Okay, because just the business of it. Jordan is in a mutual ownership of the footage with the NBA. Then you have Mandalay Bay Sports, Mandalay Sports production company. You have ESPN. You have all of these major galactic billionaire networks that had to collaborate, come together, agree, move forward, and expedite in the middle of a pandemic. So for that, applause. Just the process of getting this made was impossible for most. And that's why it took 20 years to get to this point. It is absolutely preposterous that Michael Jordan had to say that I think people are going to watch this documentary and think lesser of me, or they're going to hate me because he had Final Cut on the damn thing. Okay. So it's going to be exactly the narrative that he wanted to put out there. So I am with you guys in that I think exactly the same of Jordan that I did before, that he was a killer, that he was almost a borderline asshole, if not over the line asshole to his own teammates. But there were also, on the contrary, stories of compassion and genuineness with the security guards that I knew of, but I was hearing those stories. I never actually listened to them. And now that he finally told me those stories, a new appreciation for how he treated the people closest to him. Because when you are a galactic superstar like Michael Jordan is, you can't please everybody. You can't keep everyone close to you. He talked about he couldn't even leave his hotel room at home or whatever because he's Michael Jordan. And he took care of the people at all times closest to him and had those relationships. So I felt like I learned a lot more about the individual, and watching all the games back, knowing how the results were going to go. It was so well produced that I felt like I was still watching a live game. I found myself looking at the clock for 10 straight hours of documentary footage, and that's how you know it's good.
Yeah, that's a really great point, because one of the notes I made tonight was, I've been watching this with my wife and my 13-year-old son, and my 13-year-old son who knows how all of this turns out, and my wife who doesn't know anything about it. When Steve Kerr hits that shot after the Steve Kerr interlude and his story is told in episode 9, like my wife was standing up cheering, right? And what I think this did more than anything was introduce people to who Jordan was and introduce people to his sort of majesty as an athlete. And for people like me who are super fans and grew up with Michael Jordan, it's funny, Darren Ravel has been doing these pre-shows about memorabilia with Michael Jordan, and they had a guy in tonight talking about how he used to hang out at the multiplex and go into and just walk into the gym with Michael Jordan. And I've been trying to explain to people and tell people what it was like to be a Jordan fan of my age in my era, who lived 10 minutes from Michael Jordan, who went to the same gym that Michael Jordan went to. He was so accessible and so tangible and so real. I think that's part of why I can justify any way he acts, because he brought so much joy and happiness, credibility, and fame to the town I lived in, the city that I lived in, the team that I rooted for. I like him more than ever. There's not a single thing. There was a couple of moments where he's got more rage than I thought I remember, but man, I love watching him play. That's what I know more than anything. I just love watching the guy play. And I've loved talking to you guys about these shows because they have been so good. Matt Moore, nicely done. This has been the Last Dance post show from the Action Network. I'm Chad Millman, for Matt Moore, for Justin Fan, for Rob Perez, Worldwide Wob. Thanks to everybody for watching.